And foremost, thank you all for being here. We certainly appreciate your interest in what the Methodist Church is doing at annual conference. A quick review. My name is Rachel Wyman Dossett. I am your annual conference representative. And the Methodist Church is unique because at the annual conference and general conference, it's 50% laity, which are folks like us, and 50% clergy, meaning folks like Pastor Taylor. So that's unique to the United Methodist Church and one that we should really celebrate. A quick reminder, you can see here that the little green globe, we are in the second year of our quadrennium, and this year's focus was generosity in all creation. Annual conference happened from June 14th until June 16th. And it was in Greenville this year, and it will be in Greenville again next year. Going back to last year, we were in our first year in the quadrennium, which was generosity in all places. And like I said before, today was generosity in all creation. So I think you get the pattern here that next year we'll move on to that next bubble. And I'm just going to plant the seed right now that it was my first year last year, and I'm now in my second year. So a very good time to think about becoming Ann Street's delegate would be at a new quadrennium. So do the math there, you got a couple years left before I'm going to be going out to all of you. But annual conference really is a beautiful way to express God's love and to do God's work. So I'm going to start with a pretty long video. It's about 10 minutes, so get nice and comfy in your seat. But it really was the best way to demonstrate the celebration, because this is actually our 50th birthday this year of the United Methodist Church. For some of you who are thinking, I thought we were around a lot longer than that. We have been in a sense, but for the United Methodist Church, we are celebrating our 50th birthday. And obviously there's a lot going on in the Methodist Church this year. And for information on the Commission on a Way Forward, which specifically addresses the special conference that's happening in February, we're going to have another church meeting that's all we talk about. For two reasons. One, to honor all of the, to make people aware and heard, and to be able to prayerfully talk about what our church is doing, to devote that time for that, but also to honor what's happening at annual conference, because to be 100% honest, it was a 2-day conference in which we talked about the commission about 15 minutes. Certainly all of those feelings were addressed throughout the conference, but it's while right now it feels like the most important thing that the church has to do, the reality is, what's up, Matt?
What is the commission?
The Commission on a Way Forward is the specific group of people who were appointed by the bishop to deal with issues of homosexuality in the way that it reflects in the United Methodist Church. Is the shortest sentence that I can give you. And if you are interested more in that, that's at that other meeting. We will review all of those things. And what it means, how it's formed, what the special conference is, etc. But I just really wanted for today, to honor and celebrate all of the other things that we did talk about. And obviously we're in a time of people of concern, where people feel really anxious. And I feel like this 10-minute clip that we're about to watch was a beautiful depiction of the fact that we can continue to live in hope, that ultimately this is God's church. It's not the Methodist Church, it's not Rachel's church, it's God's church. And Dr. Alfred Day, who is the General Secretary of the General Commission of Archives and History, gave a beautiful overview. And like I said, we're just going to watch about 15 minutes or 10 minutes of it. But you can watch all of annual conference from the comfort of your couch. It is online for you to see from beginning to end. But without further ado, and to talk about our birthday, those are all the things that we combined, all the churches we combined. But Anna's going to pull up the video.
That makes me proud. Does it make you proud? The Uniting Conference morphed into the denomination's first general conference, which could not complete its work. And so there was a special general conference after 1968 that was authorized for 1970. Guess where it was held? Anybody? St. Louis, where the special session of the general conference will be held in 2019. A quadrennial study commission on structure, social principles, and doctrine was created, along with a commission on religion and race, to deal with the dismantling of the now defunct central jurisdiction and ensuring the inclusion of those who had been formerly segregated. It is worthy of note that the full, complete termination of the central jurisdiction came at the insistence of the EUB Church. Not the Methodist Church, but of the EUB Church. However, exaltation at the birthing of the United Methodist Church would be followed by difficult, divisive issues in the church and across society, more complex and divisive than those who created the plan of union could have ever imagined. Externally, there were civil rights and racial unrest, the women's movement, heightening ethnic consciousness, affirmative action and inclusion, the Vietnam War, poverty, urban decay, deindustrialization, a continuing Cold War, new coalitions of conservatives politically, and a rising tide of evangelicals within the United Methodist Church. Inside, the church was trying to live into its union and to a rising commitment to pluralism, diversity, and structural change all around, and affirmation of a new doctrinal hermeneutic called the Quadrilateral, and liberalization in teachings about divorce, remarriage, homosexuality, and inclusive language. This led to the emergence of a conservative movement within the United Methodist Church, which the latter two issues were most expressed as concerns. But matters of war, race, gender, doctrine, scriptural authority were never far from the surface. Don't miss this. The United Methodist Church came together amidst turbulent torrents and set out to navigate troubled waters. The United Methodist Church's testimony to global Christianity in 1968 was, we're better together than we are alone. But how truly united would the United Methodist Church be? The earlier merger in our history, 1939, brought unity at the price of racial segregation and regionalized jurisdictions. The 1946 merger that brought the Evangelical Church and the UB Church together was a setback for the ordination of women, ordained in the UB since the late 1800s, but never in the Evangelical Church. How would the United Methodist Church honor the witness of the smaller, more regionalized Evangelical United Brethren Church, living into the new diversity, often expressed itself in a rising number of authorized and unauthorized caucus groups, which would be the new church's present and to this day continuing challenge? During the first 50 years, the United Methodist Church has lived with and through the push and pull of a number of cultural currents flowing throughout its life. Living in the midst of these have created for us, and in our context as a church, swirls of disagreement. The current of liberation, freedom from poverty, old and new Jim Crow laws, male domination, restraints in sexual expression, opportunities for women, obedience to government, handed down theologies, freedom to be black and beautiful, gay and proud, a professional woman and a mother, a patriot and a resistor, a doubter and a believer, all at the same time. The current of inclusion. The new United Methodist Church would be vigorous in its efforts to include racial and ethnic minorities at every level, especially modeled from the top. Replacing male gender words as the norm and substituting male gender words when speaking about God sparked heated debates. The current of autonomy and self-determination. The what floats your boat, do your own thing, my wayism of the culture tacks against the Wesleyan DNA of holy conferencing and connectionalism. The United Methodist Church continues to wrestle with the impact of its constitutional assertion that the annual conference is the basic unit of the denomination, while allowing more and more freedom for local churches to organize for mission in their own ways. The current of participation and hands-on involvement, the civil rights marches and activism of the late 60s has morphed into how people decide what is newsworthy and what is not, and who are the authoritative voices they'll listen to. Now, instead of a few, there are many. Radio shows, podcasts, video of everything, everyone, everywhere. The age when the United Methodist Church grew up is an age when all persons are equal in determining what's important to them, what news and information sources they'll listen to, and what they won't. The current of globalization. In the last 50 years, the world has become increasingly free from limits imposed by national borders. More instantaneous communication, free trade, multinational corporations erode, even obliterate the boundaries we once knew. Would anyone have imagined in 1968 that at the United Methodist Church's 50th birthday, significant numbers closing in on an equal number of United Methodists are living outside the United States? The current of global migration. We live in a time when millions of people are fleeing conflict in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Ukraine, Southeast Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa, creating the highest level of displacement in the world since World War II. The ripples and swirls and even torrents of this dynamic movement have stirred pressures and changes to the global landscape and its balances of power that we would not have recognized 50 years ago. The current of rising political conservatism, neo-nationalism, perhaps in response to this globalization, migration and refugee crisis, and the rise of new political movements like Brexit in Britain, Make America Great Again here in the United States, the alt-right, and neo-nationalist movements in Germany and France, to name a few. There is both the feeling and experience of increased tribalism, calling for increasing authoritarianism stoked by fake news, manipulated by social media, creating an environment of doubt and mistrust in relation to formerly reliable sources of news. One of the fundamental realities of the time in which we live and are called to bring the gospel are forces that are making chaos the order of the day. But hear this, people. At the 50th birthday of the United Methodist Church, we're a church that was born in a time of great social and political upheaval. A church that boldly asserted union in just such times. The unfinished business of Albert Outler's great uniting service sermon remains just as unfinished today. And now, the leadership of the United Methodist Church is in our hands. Outler's sermon preached at the 1968 Uniting Conference is not only one of the seminal documents in Methodist history, but it's important today because it speaks an aura of hope. Think of it. Where there were once 5 different churches, there now is one. Diversified as we may be, differences that once kept people apart. Language, race, folkways, piety, personality, and differing practices of democracy have been overcome. Separated Christian brothers and sisters rooted in shared ethos of personal faith and social holiness together, mutually inclusive, not exclusive, joined us as family. The real work of the United Methodist Church began on April 23rd, 1968. And it will begin again as 2019 forges a way forward, and 2020 will live us into the next quadrennial reshaping of United Methodist discipline. Though fraught with complexities, doubts, frustrations, and failures of the first Pentecost, the 50-year-old United Methodist Church will also be filled with new possibilities for reformation and renewal because of the joining of what was once separate makes for better, stronger, more complete, and well-equipped churches. Times of uncertainty, upheaval, and chaos are not only times to reach for old order and organization, they are also times for being open to the Holy Spirit's greatest gift, creativity. However, this will only come to pass if the church raises up, in Albert Outler's words, frontiersmen and women for tomorrow, dynamically adaptive to the new world as foremothers and forefathers were in theirs. At its heart, the message delivered on our birthday staked out the new life of the United Methodist Church in tripartite form. Truly Catholic, truly evangelical, truly reforming. Truly Catholic or inclusive, open and boundaried by the bare essentials and the canons of Christ and Christian discipline, delivered in the confessions of faith and the opening of hearts, minds, and doors to new and bold ventures. Truly evangelical, called to mission flowing from the heart of the gospel that all are loved by God with a special love demonstrated in Jesus Christ, pardoning, healing, and reconciling ways which create new possibilities for all people. And truly reforming, an eagerness to be renewed, not just once, but again and again and again, judged by the future as well as by the past, self-examining without self-justification, creative in discontent, and rooted in the conviction that mere good is not good enough, but the enemy of the best. From Albert Outler's mouth to God's ear. And now from Albert Outler's mouth to the United Methodist Church's inner ear. Some will say 1968 was then, and this is now. But the United Methodist Church's birthday jubilee, it feels like the mood of our dear church.
All right, go and stop
Many
there.
places.
All right. Can I hear an amen?
Amen.
Let me try that one more. Can I hear an amen?
Amen.
All right. So obviously we have some conversations to have in the future, but I hope what you're hearing loud and clear is that there's hope, because with God there is always hope. So that was not our only speaker. We had lots of great speakers, and if you're sitting on your couch and you're about to find something on Netflix because you just want to chill out for a little while, watch Bishop Jonathan Holton. He is, if I could have found a 10-minute excerpt, but you just got to watch the whole thing. He's an amazing speaker. He actually is the bishop in South Carolina, and he gave so much insight. He actually spoke twice at conference. And like I said, you can find it online. If you just put in the search bar North Carolina Annual Conference, the page comes up, and it really is a great web page this year, easy to navigate and find. So these are just a few things that I wrote in my notebook that he said. But like I said, he was incredibly inspiring. He also talked a lot about leadership, keeping in mind that 50% of the people out there are clergy, and annual conference is a time for clergy to get renewal. And I appreciated the things that he said on leadership, which is leadership is a decision. We are all called to do something special. Step up into places we are afraid to step into. Leadership is hard work, and you need to get tough. And he goes on to talk about that. Doesn't mean mean-spirited, it just means tough. And last, it says leadership is a community. When we act like community, we are at our best. The other main speaker was in reflection of our theme this year, which is generosity in all creation. And the Reverend Pat Watkins spoke to us, and he actually has spent most of his time in ministry as a missionary. And so it was really interesting to get that perspective and to hear his story. He used the book of Job to teach us about the importance of God's creation. And I learned that we know that, Job lost his entire life in the first 2 chapters of the book of Job. He was a pretty wealthy man, pretty blessed by all accounts, and then he loses it all. And then there's a conversation between Job and God asks Job a series of 52 questions, and all but 3 are actually about God's creation, meaning not necessarily humans, but all of God's creation. And so that was a really interesting thing for me to ponder, which is one of the lessons of Job is that we need a fundamental shift from where we are we are the focus of God's eye. Obviously, he has a soft spot for us, but ultimately, God cares about all of creation, and that it is used several times. It says that Christ died to reconcile all of creation. And I think that we often forget that piece of it. It's not just about us. Reverend Watkins provided a few very practical suggestions and gave beautiful examples throughout his presentation of things that different churches were doing in the conference to reflect this. But he challenged us to create a creation care ministry team, which would be most effective if not just the tree huggers. His words, not mine. And I thought that was a really interesting thing for our church council to take under advisement and see if that would be an appropriate thing for us to look at. There certainly are other churches in our conference that have this. I know that he used the example of Kitty Hawk, is our nice coastal friends who have a pretty active creation care ministry team whose focus is on creation care. We're going to skip these. What time do people need to get out of here? 10. Is 10:40 too late? 10:35, Taylor says. Why, you have somewhere to be? Okay, 10:35. Then can we just click on that top one there? I want to leave time because while she's pulling that up, I'll introduce Miss Allie. Go ahead and stand for us while she's working on that. Allie, go ahead and turn around. This is Miss Allie Kitchell. I know most of you know this fine lady, but she had a unique role this year because she went to the youth annual conference, which is hard for me to not say youth annual conference because that's what they call it in Nebraska, but here it's the annual youth conference. But she will be speaking in a couple of minutes after we finish this stuff about her experience. All right, go and have a seat. All right, let's watch this short video on what Laity is doing. This is on the presentation of Laity Ministries.
Yahweh Yoga is a practice for our minds, for our souls, and for our bodies.
It's Christian yoga. It's a way to express yourself and get close to God through movement.
They start with a devotional, and then the devotional just kind of ties into your breathing, and there's music played the whole time. Devotional, and then at the end ends up with a prayer.
The love that you feel, the stillness, to just be still and out of the world for an hour is just like the most priceless gift you could get these days.
Being able to come to yoga was just my time to be able to be quiet with the Lord and just really listen to what He was telling my heart.
I think about the times that I've had mountaintop experiences in my faith, and we can't have those every day. But we can have them something similar to that when we're on our mats. The Holy Spirit is certainly present.
Yahweh Yoga brings me closer to God in that it is a time to be still on your mat. In that stillness, you can hear Him speak to you and speak to your heart and hear that He wants to fill those desires of your heart.
Since I come the first time, I can't get away from it. I love it.
We have a lot of new friends because this is not only people within our church, but it's people within our community. so we bond with them. Our program has really grown. We're seeing Methodists come, Baptists come, people that don't even go to church come. Some people are driving 45 minutes, even from outside the county. It's just growing by leaps and bounds.
I'm not a member of this church, but everyone was so friendly, I just kept coming back. Just open to everyone, everyone's welcome. When I first came, I said that one of my goals was to be able to touch my toes again. And I'm just about there.
It's changed my life. It's amazing. It just is so truly amazing.
Thanks, Anna. So I wanted to show this because at annual conference we have a wonderful time where we get to see what laity is doing across the conference. And to reflect Bishop Holton's words, we all have a gift. And like I said, in the Methodist Church, we're so unique in that we are balanced perfectly with our clergy, which means that we also are charged to create programming and to reach out to the world. And I thought this is a really unique way. Obviously, as a physical therapist, I'm particularly interested in ways to connect movement and physical activity with spiritual life. And but ultimately, I just thought it was a really great demonstration of what the laity is doing in the conference. There's another video there. We're not going to play it for time's sake, but it talks about the Hope Center in Wilmington. And I chose it because I know that the youth actually, I was talking to Julia, and it sounds like she has plans to possibly take the youth down there either this fall or spring. And I know that James, our dear intern, who we miss dearly already, but he met his classmates actually at the Hope Center a couple of times during his internship as a part of a class requirement. Speak at perfect timing, you guys. I was just talking about you. All right, welcome. Okay, so the Hope Center is a great place in Wilmington that our church will become connected to. As I said before, if you go to the website, so NCCUMC, that stands for North Carolina Conference, that's where I wear this t-shirt, so that anytime you see these letters together, you think, that's my conference. And if you just go to the annual conference website, it's very easy to navigate, and you can actually watch all of these short 2-minute laity videos, which are excellent ways to brainstorm what we could do, and also just to celebrate what our conference is doing. So we also had resolutions this year. I know last year I read them all to you very painfully, so that you know what a resolution is like. I'm not going to do that this year. Yes. But we did have 4 resolutions this year. 2 passed with amendments, but all 4 passed. And if you're interested in these, I have hard copies, or you can find them online as well. The last one here is a nice transition to Miss Sally here. But the last one is actually from the Youth Annual Conference was presented, and it was a specific resolution that challenged churches to do several things, but one was to set aside money in the budget to provide a scholarship for youth to go to Youth Annual Conference. So I was like, oh, perfect timing as we talk about the budget and finance this week. And it's approved through Church Council that the suggestion and what was approved by the annual conference was that churches consider adding a specific line item so that it's always on our mind for a scholarship for a student or someone from the church to go to Youth Annual Conference, because what they're finding is that they're having a really hard time getting a representative of the whole state. And I know that here we have a church who is amazing with financial support, and that's never been a barrier for us. But by putting it in your church budget, as Dave Ramsey would say, you know, it's making it a financial priority. So that's something for us to consider as well. So without further ado, we are going to end with Miss Allie Kittrell talking a little bit about her experience.
So first I'm going to talk about some things that we did every day at camp, and then talk about what those mean to me. Every day we had worship in more than one way, lots of singing, and we also had a different pastor talk every day. Each pastor had a message, and as the week went along, they contributed to go together for the overall message of us all having sin-sick souls and how God is there for us in the process of healing that, but that as we know, we're all never going to be perfect, so He's there for us when we do fall. One quote that I had in my notes, because like Miss Rachel said, I took a lot of notes of the speakers, but one of my favorites was, we are not called to fill the pews with people, but we are called to fill the world with disciples. And then two things we had every day were growth groups. We met a couple times with them, and we also had dorm groups at night. At those, we talked about how we were feeling about everything we were talking about and everything we were doing, and how those experiences related to our lives, and that was just a way to do that in a smaller setting. And we also had Vespers. There are youth staff that get elected at the camp, which I'll talk about later, and each night one of them would come up and share their testimony to the church. And then we had on Monday night, we had Mission Monday. And so it was a lot like some of the packing events we'll do at our church, and we all had a station and we passed bags along as we would pack towels and combs and other toiletries for less fortunate places in the world to show them God's love. That was on Monday again. And then later in the week we had a talent show, and that was a really fun thing to see everyone's different talents, because there were a lot, I'm not one of them, of musically talented people. And so it was just great to see the people that you got to know that week and see them show how amazing they are. And then every day, another thing we learned about was legislative affairs. And so that's a very complex process. So the first day, we were just learning about how it would work, and then we had a example one that wasn't a real resolution, but it was just to show us how that would go. And then throughout the rest of the week, we had our real topics. And just like the adult conference, we talk about lots and lots of different topics that are happening that the church is trying to form an opinion on. And so this is a way for the youth to come up with anything that they feel strongly on, whether it is in the church or in your schools. And so a few of those resolutions we had were concerning ministries and language inclusion in the Methodist Church, sexual education in schools, gun control, plastic straws, plus-size placement in stores, offshore drilling, fair trade coffee, and the treatment of border immigrants. So all those are pretty controversial. So this was a time where the writer or the author of the resolution would get up and read to you how they felt about it, and they would give you facts to support what they believe, and even quotes from the Bible, just supporting that topic. And then at the end of it, it would tell you where they wanted this to be sent and the goal of that resolution of how it would change the world. And so we also had resolutions to our Constitution, so that the youth have their own constitution of how they want processes to go. And so we updated our constitution this year so it matched our current practices. And then we also had a nominations committee which helped with candidates that were running for offices in the annual conference. Later on, those candidates had speeches, and the next morning we voted for those people. And these people are the ones who plan the annual conference for the next year. They planned the idea of the Sin Sick Soul message throughout the week. And then there's also other jobs that are smaller as a responsibilities, but you get voiced also. So for me, I will be the primary district representative for our district this year. At the end of the week, we have a communion service, and it's very emotional because it's a time where the family you've made that week is all sitting there together, and it's kind of when all the things we've talked about and you realize that you are going home and you won't see these people that you love so much for a little while. And so we cry, but we're also happy because we're still there together and we know that we have made those friends. And the thing for me that I realized a lot this week is that our district is really lacking with the youth members' presence at conference. I was one of, I think, 3 or 4 people in our district, whereas other districts had 20 kids in them. So I wanted to say thank you to our church for giving me the opportunity to attend the conference. When I went, the only person I knew there was Julia, so it was a little scary because I didn't know anyone and I was going to have to be there with them for a week. But they were very open and nice to me, and I made friends that I still talk to every single day and that I can't wait to see next year at conference. So thank you.
I think it's safe to say that one of Allie's gifts is public speaking. That was amazing. I've never heard a 10th grader speak so well. And before we go, Julia just wants to say one word. Since she was at annual conference, she gets to speak too.
I just want to tell you guys that yes, Allie was our only youth representative at ACS this year. I begged her and basically made her go, but she was excited in the end. But let's have another round of applause for her. I mean, that is just so hard to go somewhere on your own. As an adult, it's difficult to go places on your own, and obviously Allie shined while she was there. We paid for Allie's tuition out of our youth budget, and that was something I was glad to do and had already been thinking about doing. But I would love to set aside, money to send a youth delegate or more in the following years to come. As she talked about, our district is grossly underrepresented, and that's something that I and our other district youth leaders are working on, and that we look forward to adding more people to annual conference session for youth next year. So annual conference session for youth is held at the end of July. It's held at Methodist University in Fayetteville. We had over 100 kids come this year, and like most youth ministry, there are ebbs and flows. But when I was a youth and was in ACS, we had over 300 kids go. So we've really seen that up and down flow, as we see in church, as we see in youth. Those trends are normal, but we really want to be back on that upswing. As you can see from Allie's testimony, it was a pretty impactful week. I'm a product of Conference Youth Ministry, and it led me into my job field. And not everyone's going to come out being a youth minister, but everyone can come out with a love and passion for God and how to show that love to the world around you and how to use your voice to affect change and show people the love of Christ that they deserve and that they're worth it. So I just thank you guys for supporting us and for supporting Allie.